We'll get started. Call this special open meeting at Council, Town of Oliver, January 26th, reconvening February 1st. Call this meeting to order and ask for a motion to reconvene the meeting from January 26th.
So moved.
Moved and second. Call the question. Is anyone opposed? Motion is carried, and we'll move right into the 2020-24 capital budget, and I'll pass it over to the CFO, who has some additional documentation that he's prepared since our last meeting paused. CFO?
Hi there. Thank you, Your Worship. On Friday, I sent out to Council just the same summary, but it's a little different presentation. It's exactly the same projects, and what the intent of this summary is to do is to actually provide Council with a snapshot of all the projects when we deal with infrastructure, specifically in transportation infrastructure projects across the three major funds, that being the general capital, the water, and the sewer. This spreadsheet does go out 10 years. I've hidden some columns here. But initially you can see specifically where I'm focused right now is in the infrastructure projects, where we left off at the last meeting, where you can see, for example, we're dealing with the various projects. You can see them in 2021, 2022, for example, Kootenay Street. You can see the money that we have allocated in the water sewer budgets and general capital, as well as moving forward into 2022. You can also see where the main construction of those projects will take place. The same goes for Okanagan Street rehabilitation, School Avenue reconstruction and paving, Station Street upgrades, Sawmill Road rehabilitation, etc. The priorities in the first three columns, columns A, column B, column C, those are coming from our asset management plan. So they aren't arbitrarily assigned by staff. They are actually prioritized by either an analysis that's been done via, and Sean can help me out with this a little bit more as to how those priorities have been derived. And perhaps, Sean, you may want to just jump in there and inform Council how those priorities are arrived at.
Okay, thank you, Doug, Your Worship and Council members. The priorities were rated. We did road assessments back in 2012 and finalized in 2014. But we're also looking at the water and sewer infrastructure, and maybe sometimes those may take a priority where we have some problem pipes or problem areas. So whether it's water, sewer, or general, sometimes those can dictate which is a priority. So it does get a little bit confusing, but for the most part, we have been prioritizing as much as possible with the road infrastructure. If it needs, if the road needs some TLC paving, or even curb or sidewalk isn't looking that good in that area, then we've had it on the capital list. And then there's been some projects out of the blue, like Packing House Lane, that popped up that weren't even on our radar, that just happened to come into fruition last year when that development went through, and which is a big chunk of money that will be needed for next year.
Okay. Therefore, to continue along, like I said, the spreadsheet just is trying to give Council a longer vision being the immediate 5 years. Obviously, some of those projects can be moved around, but we did want to provide Council with some level of direction or level of comfort as to where are the capital works coming from and where the funds are going to be expended or expected to be expended over the next 5 to 10 years. Then moving forward, what I also did, now we'll collapse this just slightly over here. Then I also took a look at the source of funding. Where do these projects, where are we going to potentially fund and how are they going to be funded? And this is where you can see the infrastructure, the 2021 source of funding, the highlighted blue column is taxation. Then we have debt reserves, gas tax, water fund, sewer fund, etc. And we did the same in 2022, just to give council an look into the next 2 years. And the reason why the next 2 years was chosen specifically was because with the knowledge that the police contract is potentially going to be incurred at some point in 2022. I'm not quite sure exactly when in 2022, but you're starting to see in 2021, for example, right now, when we entered the budget discussions, we had capital that was funded from taxation was just over $1 million, 1074.1. How that breaks down, the money we have available for capital, is the capital from operations, and specifically what that really is the operating fund is contributing over to the capital fund $233,000, and what that is truly, you can say it's operating surplus that is being utilized to fund capital infrastructure. So it's certainly not a significant amount of money. The 9%, the 3 years of 9% police tax, which was 2018, 2019, and potentially 2021, will generate $424,000. So we have available for capital $657,000. So presently we're sitting in 2021 with a deficit of $417,000. So in plain words, $417,000 of tax projects in one way, shape, or form has to be reduced or eliminated from the budget. Projecting out into 2022, however, it does get a little bit bleaker, obviously, because projects on the books at the moment are about $2.7, $2.8 million. And once again, those will be subject to change, but we certainly have one that won't change, and that's Packing House Lane. The capital from operations, even if we say it's still going to be consistent with what was in previous years, $200,000. However, the police tax increases goes away, and that goes away to be utilized to fund the actual police contract. So we're left with only $200,000 for capital purposes. And so therefore you're starting to see the infrastructure deficit or the structural deficit that you have in your capital works projects. So like I said, and I've only went out 2 years. I didn't want to go any further and depress people even more, but it is trying to just present a clearer picture into the future of exactly what challenges that the town will be faced into the future to fund its capital works. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Doug. Any questions for the CFO? Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, I have a few questions probably from different departments and some through the Public Works. When I went through this, I just some, we've probably been told this years ago and I've forgotten the answer. General government, computer hardware, software. Do water and sewer pay for any of that?
Yes, they do. They pay about, it's about close, I think it's around 40%, 40 to 45%.
Okay, but it's not broken out on this report.
It is in 2021, you can see it, where I'm just showing you right there.
I see the 31 for general, but I don't see any water sewer.
Over in column AP and AQ, where I just highlighted on the screen, Councillor Mattis, right here.
Oh, I see. That's the source of the funding. I got you.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, that's on a different report. And I know you told us this before, the SCBA units, self-contained, they're higher this year. We had to get more units.
Yeah, and that's being funded out of the Joint Fire Reserve. And that is, yeah.
Okay, and maybe I'm missing it again. Maybe I need to look on the other report. I'll have to, Street at Smilk and Windsor.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what I sent out to you, first of all, was the page of the projects, the 2 pages. And then
Yeah, but it doesn't break it out by water sewer there, and I didn't realize that.
yeah, and then on page 3 and 4, it gives you the source of funding.
Okay, I think that clarified, that answers my questions.
I don't see any other hands up, so I'll just jump in. So what you're telling us, CFO, is we either need to cut 400,000 approximately from the 2021 capital budget or find another funding source?
For 2021, you definitely have to reduce. Keep in mind, right now, when I prepared this at $417,000, the Vector truck is still in there, and that is being funded out of taxation for $263,000. But we also have the storm pipe upgrades of $239,000. Once we get into the Station Street program, we're going to be utilizing various, there's some taxes there, there's some capital surplus there. So if we're going to, it's always possible to move some of these projects around, but certainly the bigger ones that you have coming out of taxation right now are your storm pipe upgrade and your the vacuum truck.
And to go a little further about that, I guess if we have to really include Packing House Lane in the 2021 thinking, because that's a goal. We have to do that at the very least, and that is 368 of taxation, which is more than we even have available for 2022. Again, without finding another funding source.
Yeah, and that's right. And one of the challenges that council is going to have moving forward is that the town of Oliver has been very, very fiscally prudent, meaning no debt. The general fund has 0 debt other than the fire department. The fire department is funded entirely upon its own footing. So the town has been very risk adverse to debt. So therefore, a lot of the capital works that have been undertaken either through taxation, grants, user fees, DCCs, but generally, like I said, not debt, which is very highly unusual, but it is what it is. And so one of the challenges, of course, moving forward, when you're now going to deal with water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, you have facilities coming down that council wants to look at and probably need to be replaced or repaired. That's the challenge when you have a very extremely low tax rate, and I've proved that to you at the tax distribution report that I presented. And so therein lies the challenge. And back in 2017, the previous council, when they put in that 9%, which was a very prudent thing to do, extremely smart. And this challenge coming forward was well documented and well known. It's not a surprise to the council of the day, and I'm sure 2 or 3 of the members can certainly vouch for me, saying that, this is exactly where we knew we'd be at in 2022.
Yeah, just one follow-up, more comment, and looking at what we have to cut or find another funding source for, which I guess could be reserves or borrowing, but you can only do that so long. There's $2 million of taxation for 3 higher infrastructure projects that we haven't even started talking about. I see Councillor Mattis has another question.
I do. The 87,000 that we chopped from the operations, is that in this report?
Yes, it is. That's included in that the $233,000. That was what previous to that number was about $140,000 or $150,000.
Okay. Now, second question would be in the $1 million for the Station Street Plaza. Is that a washout on this because it's based strictly on grants? Or is it
yes.
Is it part
Yes,
of our deficit?
For the plaza, it's a washout because of the grants.
Okay, so it's it would not be in this 417,000.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
One quick question before I go to Councilor Ventimiglia. The grant for Station Street, is that 100% funded at
Yes.
$1 million? It is. Okay, thank you. Councilor Ventimiglia?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just looking at the moment for a little bit of clarification. I think the number on the form that we were sent a couple of days ago, the number that we're looking to cut and or find other funding sources for is different. Ours is 155,000. So I just wanted to see why it was different. Yeah, what you've got up on the screen now.
It's the vac truck.
So sorry.
It's the Vector truck.
So what does that mean? It's
The
been taken out here?
417, the 155 plus the Vector truck makes 417.
So in the report that we have printed in front of us, it doesn't include the Vector truck.
The one that's on the screen right now has the Vector truck in it right on there. On row 30.
I'm a bit confused because in the one that I'm looking at that was sent to us a couple of days ago, in the 2021 line, general, it shows Vector truck 527.
Right.
So it looks like it's there. But then when I flip over to the, if you're able to scroll up to the last part of the last page where it shows the 2021 and 2022, that's where the difference is. So it shows capital funded from taxation 812.1, capital from operations 233, police tax increases 424, funds available for capital 657. I just want to make sure that we're looking at the same numbers because I don't think we are right now.
They're presented differently, but they're exactly the same projects. I know it's very difficult because I can't see exactly what you're showing me, but it's exactly the same that I presented the other day. It's just presented now, laid out in a 5-year window.
Right, I totally understand that. I'm just saying that the whatever form we were sent on Friday, something like that, is different numbers than what's on the screen.
Yeah, Councilor, I was going to say, Councilor Ventimiglia, can I just jump in for 1 sec?
Please do.
Doug, I do see one discrepancy with your chart compared to the one you sent us, and it's the Town Hall Affordable Housing Project. The one you sent us shows gas tax at 260. There's a gas tax component to that, and I don't think there was a gas tax component.
You've got it under taxation at 270.
Right, but in the sheet that we were given, the taxation component is only 8,000.
Okay, that's possible. I'd be using the twos.
I thought we spent all our. I don't know if we've spent all our gas tax money. I know there was quite a bit of it used for Station Street, 534, but we did have. I know there was like 700 and some odd thousand, and maybe that's the difference. That
is the difference. There you go. Thank you. It's exactly. Thank you, Councilor Ventimiglia and the mayor. I was wondering. I was trying, it's not the Vector truck is in there, actually. It was because of that tax, the gas tax wasn't there. You're right.
That reduces it back to the 155 then.
Correct.
Councilor Ventimiglia, do you have anything more at this time? I think you're muted. Okay.
Could we get clarification then we're short only the 155?
It's the 155. I'm sorry. Now that that was pointed out to me, yes.
Because there's, what, 260 gas tax that wasn't put in the formula?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Councilor Michelle?
Thank you, Your Worship. I must be getting old. When we did the water and sewer budgets, was that vac truck in the water budget? Due to the
No,
CFO?
it was not.
It wasn't?
No, it was not.
So how do we pass a budget and then insert another $131,000 after? What's the point of budgeting?
Because we will amend the budget when it comes forward. The water budget forms part of the town's overall budget, just like the sewer budget does. All these budgets come forward into one bylaw. we don't do separate bylaws for financial plans for the water or the sewer budgets.
But yet we vote unanimously on the water budget, so I understand what you're saying, but then what's the point of budgeting? I mean, we might as well just budget all at the same time. I mean,
That's where we're going to go towards in 2021. That's going to be my recommendation at the end of all this.
yeah.
The reason we do water early is because we need to set rates.
Anyway, that was my question.
Councillor Ventimiglia?
Yeah, thank you. I was on mute before. So I just have a couple of questions, I guess. Packing House Lane, which is in the budget for next year. We originally talked about that last year. Was it not in our last year's budget?
Through the chair to Councillor Ventimiglia, yes, it was, absolutely was. What has happened now is it forms part of that approximately $750,000 capital surplus that I was alluding to at the last meeting, because there has been no money spent on that. So therefore, it's just rolling forward as a capital surplus. Now, whether or not we leave it as a capital surplus and just leave it sit there, or we utilize it for other capital projects, that's the discussion that we certainly are having right now.
So just because I'm really quickly trying to look and see, and I'm not going to get there fast enough, when it comes up in next year's budget, one of the 4, I think, fairly major projects next year, does it come up as being funded through taxation again, or does it come up as being funded out of reserves?
Through taxation, because the reserves will be spent in 2021 with this model. Because
Okay.
what will happen with our capital budget, because that project wasn't done, it really has to be rebudgeted again. And therefore, and we did raise taxes for it, and we earmarked taxes, we earmarked gas tax monies, none of that came through. So all that's going to happen with all that, either the money is going to be carried forwarded in our capital surplus or the grants or in the reserves. One way or another, the money's sitting there. Now you can say, what are you going to do with that money? It should just stay there. That's legitimate as well. If that's the case, if that's council's wishes, then we definitely have to look at our 2021 projects moving forward with our storm pipe upgrades, etc. All of these projects, because we're going to be short money. Because
Okay,
I've utilized it in the reserves column as a source of funding.
So I guess there's just different, different philosophies or different ways of doing things just in general. If you save budgeted money for the project that it was budgeted for versus rolling it back in and having to almost reprove the importance of the project.
Yeah.
What are our reserves at? Is that on here?
Well, no, I don't. I had some of the reserves on a different document. Our general surplus last year was about $1.6 million, but we have other reserves as well. For example, road capital. We had gas tax monies that weren't allocated, and I was estimating them to be approximately $796,000 in 2021. So there are some reserves, but I can't give you the year-end actual number right now for our total new surplus, because we haven't closed, I'm getting closer to closing the year end, but not there yet.
Okay, yeah, I guess just my final point on that last comment is that it doesn't necessarily change things, but it would be helpful and useful information to know when we're taking 420.2, because that's the number that's jumping off the screen at me, out of reserves, what we're leaving behind for for other projects and for future years. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Ventimiglia. Therein lies part of the challenge of whereby Council Forever pay as you go. It's all the capital works were basically paid through a very low tax base. And so therefore now when you're getting into some significant projects that you wish to do, it's challenging. And that's hence my comments, for example, on the solid waste budget, that it should stand alone by itself. It should be a user fee, and repurpose that reserve to be rolled into capital works programs. Perhaps that's up to council to make a decision on those style reserves, but there are a number of reserves that we certainly could look at to repurpose, but the water and sewer are outside of those.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I just want to clarify that 750,000 that you referred to that we didn't spend last year, that's included in these numbers?
Yeah, it's included in the source of funding in that column. It says reserves.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that in fact it is in this report.
Yeah.
You alluded to 796,000 in gas tax reserves. Is that in this report?
Yes, it's under the gas tax column. We have
Okay.
a total of utilized the 262 for the housing project, the affordable housing on Main
Okay.
Street, as well as 534 for Station Street upgrades phase 2.
Okay, I just needed to clarify because when you're referring to reserves and surpluses, it doesn't sound like they're built into the budget, and I just needed to make sure that they're in this document. That we haven't increased reserves somewhere because we didn't spend it last year. It went into a reserve rather than rolling over into this year's.
So we're back to where we kind of, I don't know if Mr. Mayor, if you want to further discuss the 2021, 2022, or like I said, the 2022, definitely Packing House Lane is a commitment that's out there that, will have to be dealt with one way or another. The way it was funded in 2020 was, it was going to be, I think it was around $360,000 was coming from taxes. We were utilizing 125,000 from DCCs. We're utilizing 300,000 from developer contribution. I believe there was gas tax contribution as well of about 262,000. If my memory is correct, and that was that total project. Once again, like I said, that project did not happen in 2020, and it's not budgeted in 2021 either. It's budgeted to take place in 2022.
Right. Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Worship. So looking forward to next year, I'm pretty sure if I did the numbers right, there are 4 fairly large projects on the list, which is what makes our required funding so high. They're, when they're broken down in their priority sequence, they're numbers 1, 2, and 3. So I guess my question is, because I've seen some of them on here for like a number of years, what's the urgency for the 3 of them? Like, what's behind stacking them in 2022 versus laying them out over the next 3 years in priority sequence, like they've been listed? And could number 3, for example, on this list, if we were to keep the list in the same order that it's in right now, could that wait until, another 3 years out to be completed? Or is it in too bad of shape, bad of condition, something underneath the road or whatever it is that's the reason that it's been pushed to 2022? Because like some things, the reason I ask is because some things, for example, like CPR roof replacement and CPR sprinkler station, I'm more than halfway through my second council term, and I'm pretty sure I've seen that on every single budget, and it just keeps getting pushed out a year. So clearly that is like a nice to have, but not something that's incredibly time sensitive. And so that's what I wonder about the projects that are stacked in 2022 below. Sure, some of those streets are pretty ugly and pretty crumbly in places, and it'd be really nice to have them redone. But is there something that makes it so that they need to be done in 2022, or can they be spread across the 3 years?
Sean, can you answer?
Yeah, okay, I can try to answer that. Well, yeah, a lot of these projects have been on the list for several years now, and we place them where we think we can do them, but obviously each year there's always challenges, monetary challenges, and things get pushed off, including that sprinkler system. But there isn't a high urgency. It's just that if we keep pushing projects off, then you'll never catch up. I've got a list for 10 years, and to keep our roads to the quality that they're at, which was, they're half decent roads, or they're decent roads, even if you compare them to some other municipalities. They're slowly eroding, and we are currently doing a road assessment this year. We're working on it internally, and just to compare our 2014 road assessment, and then we'll have a better idea how our roads are in comparison to 2014. But they don't get better, they slowly get worse. And if we keep pushing projects off, it's just the costs are going up, and it's just always catch up time.
Anything further, Councillor Vitamila, at this time?
No, that's good for now. I appreciate the response. I agree, we can't just keep pushing stuff off and off, but I think that answers the question that, yeah, one or two of them could be put off a year or two.
Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll have some questions for Mr. Goodsall. My understanding when we left the last meeting is that you, the mayor, had raised some concerns about moving ahead with Station Street. We were all going to go away and check with our constituents and get their opinion whether we should do Station Street or repair other roads in exchange. And at that point I said, well, if I was giving up Station Street, which I'm quite prepared to do, what would I get in exchange? So the question through to Sean was, you were going to find out which projects that we had scheduled for 2022 could be done this year. What could be moved up to fill that or a portion of that hole if we were to eliminate Station Street?
Well, it's difficult to do that when they're all tied to water and sewer. Just about every project that we have on our list, and even going out 10 years, has infrastructure in the ground. It's not
I understand that.
It's not an easy answer. But
if we give up Station Street, there's more than enough capital and there's more than enough source of funding to cover the water, sewer, and all of those other projects. Okay, because the water for sewer for Station Street more than outweighs the water sewer for the other projects. So the question was, if we eliminated one, I mean, there's not even any budget because there's enough money in all of those budgets to do the work. It's just a question of, can we do the work sooner rather than later, was the original question. And my understanding was, as you said, you could come back with an answer in a couple of days, that you wouldn't have any problem letting us know what could be done in lieu of Station Street.
Well, you're right, Councillor Mattis. In comparison to water, School Avenue can be done. It's on the list. It would fit in there. I'm not sure how those budget numbers are because we haven't done a design for it yet. We might be a little bit behind the 8 ball, but it's doable. We could squeeze that in.
So we can get it designed and done this year?
Yeah, I think we could push for that one. Okanagan may be another candidate, but then again, I think those numbers are going to go up once we do a design on that. And Kootenai Street is too large of a project to do. That's going to have to be put off in another year. There were some paving projects I did look at. They were on my list, but I think they were put out for 5 years, and I believe they were just more overlays. Elm Street was one of them, and the
Pine and Spruces.
Pardon?
Pine and Spruce Avenues.
Yeah, where are they located on the?
2023.
Okay.
So to go over that again, you said Kootenai Street was the mill overlay and mill paving overlay could not be done this year?
Not Kootenai, no. Kootenai's too
okay.
big of a project.
School could be done this year?
School in Okanagan could be done possibly, or at least we could get a design done, and I just don't know how accurate those budget numbers are. They would obviously be more accurate. That's why we've been trying to do the majority of the designs ahead of time, and then we have more accurate budget numbers. But those two are within that realm. They're a lot less than Station Street.
Okay, now we've got Okanagan on there twice. You got Okanagan Rehab Co-op to Gala, and then you've got Okanagan Street at Similkameen. Which one of the two could be done?
I'm not, just wait, time.
I know it's kind of confusing because there's two different.
Yeah, I'm getting confused on the.
That's a sewer project.
Yeah, it's
Strictly-
all sewer.
All sewer?
Yeah, that's right. There are some. That's right. There's some.
Okay, so then it would be
sewer
the other ones.
those
then.
are in the laneway for the sewer project. It's different than the actual street.
Okay,
Okanagan street rehabilitation Co-op to Gala there's some water upgrades that need to be done, and some paving, of course, and curbing and other things. Sewer's not involved in that because in those streets located in that area, the sewer's in the alleyways.
okay. So if we went in the order of priority, then the Okanagan Street would be the one to go for?
That's correct. Okanagan or School Avenue, either of those are, if they're ranked just behind each other, they could be interchangeable.
Okay. So if we dropped Station Street and then we virtually have enough money in the budget to do, let's say, school, and also solve the deficit issue at the same time. So we'd make headway on something that needs to be done. The reason I say that to council now is that I did survey my constituents, and the feedback I got was that we should repair the streets as opposed to building Station Street. And the statement that really hit home with me was, until we have a hard, fast plan that council is ready and willing to act on for Station Street, we're building a road to nowhere. And at this point, I would not say that we have a hard and fast plan of what we're going to do beyond some sort of plaza that's totally dependent on a grant. But beyond that, we're just hoping and guessing that something would happen if we built the road. So at this point, for myself, I would be more than willing to put off Station Street and take one or the other, depending on how the numbers worked and the math worked. The Okanagan Street rehab or the School Avenue reconstruction, and bring them into this year's budget. So, and then I'll end it there.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things. First, to Sean, when you did Station Street, when the hotel was being built, and obviously the water and sewer were done at the same time, what kind of condition were they in? And so I guess that leads to my point is, what is the condition of the water and sewer under Station Street that would be fixed at the same time as Station Street would be redone?
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. The water and sewer right now is okay under Station Street. It was mainly upgraded to a larger sizes to accommodate the future developments on Station and beyond. If the northwest sector ever got developed north of Lions Park and those 5 properties over there, that's the primary reason why those were upgraded. but they're fine for now. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess I'm kind of leaning towards doing Station Street. I think, as Councillor Mattis pointed out at the last meeting, we did the road and the infrastructure in the industrial park, and now we've got all sorts of people building in the industrial park. So I believe he's right. We're never going to, I don't think we're going to get anything on Station Street unless we upgrade it. And it would be much, much more of a bigger priority for me if we do get the funding to do the plaza, because we don't want a plaza down there with a road or non-existent road in front of it. And those are my points. Thank you.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a few things, I think just sort of stepping back and looking at the big picture here. Obviously, there's a lot of things that need to be done and not a lot of money. So I know we've been sort of building our tax base over the past few years in anticipation of the RCMP costs and using those funds for capital. But aside from that, we haven't built up that base for capital. And so now once those funds shift over, we're kind of in this situation where we haven't built up that base, which leads me to, I want to ask the CFO, because he had said that we're an outlier in just using this pay-as-you-go method. And so my question would be, should we be borrowing for capital projects? And then I have more after that, but I'd like to hear what the CFO has to say.
Through the chair, it depends. It depends on what type of capital project you're looking at. If it's a project that, let's say, for example, that's going to last 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, absolutely, I'm in full favor of borrowing. And the reason why is because then you're matching your expenses, the debt servicing, against the generations or the future users that are going to use the facility. I've been involved in situations in my past where we fast-tracked payment down of certain facilities at the detriment of all of our other capital works. And meaning where really what you had is you had one particular generation of taxpayers paying for the whole capital works, and meanwhile the future generations are using it and not paying for it. So that's definitely one of the reasons. And that same philosophy goes very similar with a funding of a fire truck, for example. You have an $800,000 fire truck that's going to last 20 years. Why would you not amortize that over 20 years versus paying it off immediately? I know it's great to have reserves and use reserves, and everybody is very proud that look at all the money we have in the bank. But if you really look at it from a truly costing point of view of which user should actually be paying for utilizing the service, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But once again, each project has to stand on its own. There are some projects that certainly debt makes sense, and then there's certainly some that should be user pay.
So thank you, Doug. And I think on the tails of that, then that's something that we as a council should consider, because I don't think we should be letting any of our older crumbling infrastructure fail. But at the same time, I mean, a project like Station Street that took the vision of council, I mean, we all got together in the summer and essentially scrapped the rest of our strategic plan to try to move forward with something like this, with the idea of trying to save our Main Street, because once we build something like this, that's an attraction, we can drive this traffic up to Main Street. And so if this doesn't happen now with this iteration of council, I highly doubt that it'll happen at all. I think that, we have a responsibility for roads, water, and sewer, but I think the taxpayers are looking to us for more than that, to have some vision to try to make the town better. And a project like Station Street is the way that we're going to do that. So I think we need to figure out how we can do both. So that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Well, after Councillor Bryce's go around there, I'm gonna sound like a broken record because what I was going to say was very similar. I believe that if I understood directly or correctly, which I did, from the Director of Operations, the Kootenai Street, Okanagan Street Rehab, and School Avenue, the numbers that are in the budget this year are for designs of those projects so that we can move forward with the design and budget properly. The numbers that are in the budget for next year attached to those projects are probably pretty good guesses, but they're not totally accurate based on a street design. So in my opinion, as Councillor Grice said, we got together over multiple meetings this summer, scrapping the strategic plan, thinking what can we do to move our community forward and give it a leg up kind of thing. In the middle of COVID, we made this plan then. And to now go back and try and push forward one or two streets that haven't even gone through the design stage seems a bit like poor planning, because now we're going to go and try and shove them in there, design them really quickly, get them done. The numbers that we use may or may not be accurate. Like if we need to have a plan, we need to follow it through. And I totally agree that if the Station Street project is not done this year, when we have the funds to do it, chances are it's not going to be done anytime soon. It'll be one of those really nice designs that we have lots of that then sit on a shelf somewhere. I think that moving forward with Station Street means that we believe in the potential of our community. I think that it does involve making a bold decision to, you know, not build the street to nowhere, but build the street that sets the stage for what we want to see in the area. We don't get to build out all of the private lots across the street, but we can have a vision for what we want. And we know that we have a flailing Main Street, and we can put as many beautiful flowers or veggies or whatever it is in the planters and paint as many times as we want. But the problems there go beyond that. They businesses on Main Street and businesses anywhere, they require foot traffic, they require customers, and we need to figure out how to get those people on foot into the downtown core. And we've talked so many times about how Station Street is our opportunity to do that. And so I believe in the potential of the project. I believe that it may take a few years, but we would be making an investment in the future of our community. And I think that's pretty important. And that's what I've got for now.
Oh, I'll weigh in. This budget stuff that the CFO has prepared for me has solidified my position that I think Station Street is the wrong thing to be investing in at this point in time. I wish I had this financial information when we were in our strategic planning and could see what we were looking at, and are we going to spend everything we have and not look after what we already have. I know there's been some comments that if we build it, they will come. Packing House Lane to me is a good example. I mean, it was in the greatest condition, and development has come there, and we're still spending over $1 million rehabilitating that lane. Of course, there's some DCCs associated with that. One of the problems, and one of the things I think that's great about that is that what we're doing there is really tailored to what's being developed there. And we really don't know on Station Street what's going to come. We own most of that land there. So we have to sell it to somebody and hoping that they're going to build what we want. But we don't really know what they're going to build there. And there may be some small tweaks in the wind that may make a lot of sense. I still think Station Street is a great idea. It's many years out from providing some benefit to Main Street, but we have some stuff that we need to do right now within the next 5 years. And after this year, we've got $200,000 for capital, unless we borrow. That just doesn't seem like the best way to be financially responsible. Maybe we could do School Avenue. Maybe we could put rehab Packing House Lane in the budget this year and make sure that we get it there. Maybe we push Station Street out to next year and look at it as something that we would borrow for. And at the same time, are we going to sell those lots on Station Street, or what are we going to do with them? Because we own them, we have to do something to encourage somebody to build there. I think there's only 2 or 3 other small lots at the south end of the street. that another person owns that may see the development going on there, may want to build something. It just seems like we're a little bit early here. And for me, it really comes down to maintaining what you have before you build something new. And this budget here is a cold bucket of water in the face that we are not in a very good spot. And I don't know how I could defend personally spending money on Station Street when we have so many other things going on at this point in time. And those would be my comments at this point in time. Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of points. I know that we have this. The one thing was, as we talk about engineering for these projects, it's only been in the last year that Public Works has said that we should invest money in engineering to get some projects shelf ready, so to speak, so that when we have the money, we're ready to move. In the past, we've never done that. It's all been done in the same year. We make our best guesstimate and we move ahead with the project. So spacing it out, as Councillor Ventimiglia referred to, isn't something we've done in the past. It's only something that we've taken up in the last year, on the first point. On the second point, to follow up with what the mayor is saying regarding Station Street, I don't know what everyone else's vision is, but if I understand correctly, it involves apartment buildings and retail areas. And if you're talking apartment buildings, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of people having to move here, okay, in order to fill those apartment buildings. Nothing wrong with that. And then if you're talking retail on the bottom floor of each one of those buildings that you're hoping to build down there to make your $1 million road look good, then that retail will get occupied, which is exactly what we want. And all of those people in the apartment buildings will use that retail. So in essence, and this was pointed out to me by someone else, that in essence, by building Station Street with that vision of retail below and apartments above, in essence, you're abandoning Main Street. You're not supporting Main Street by doing that. In a sense, you're abandoning it. So because the people that will live there will shop down in Station Street, they won't come up to Main Street per se. And again, it's a long-term thing because you are talking hundreds and hundreds of people in order to fill those buildings you're talking about. So I still stay very firm with repair what we've got before we build more.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. So just a couple more comments, I guess, about Station Street. There is, I've seen in the media, basically an exodus right now happening from cities to small towns, a lot of it around COVID, a lot of it around people being able to telecommute. So this is an opportunity for Oliver to put ourselves out there, to be innovative, to market to these people who are leaving the cities that we're the place to go and to set the stage for that. I think that, in the time that I've lived in town, I've just seen our Main Street get emptier and emptier. So clearly what we're doing just by maintaining the status quo isn't working. And so it is time to try something new to make a change. Is it a risk? Absolutely. I mean, of course we could talk ourselves out of it, but I think if we don't try something new, then nothing's going to change. At the very least, I wouldn't want to see this get put past next year. I think it needs to be this iteration of council who's looking at this project, because if it leaves our table, it's going to die. We were the ones that had the vision that got together to put this together. So I think it's really important that we're the ones that make the decision about it. So I would certainly be in favor of moving this forward for 2021. Thank you.
I don't see any hands up, so I'll jump in one more time. To me, this is a project that I would most definitely be willing to look at borrowing for. And the reason that I would be willing to borrow for it, it's like I would be willing to build it when they come. And that being when somebody actually commits to building something down there in one of the lots, the town-owned lots or something, one of the other lots down there, then I think that to do it in conjunction would be a really great thing. We have a design. Anybody that's interesting, or if we put our town-owned lots up for sale, anybody's going to see what the design is and what we are planning on doing there. I don't think it needs to be sitting there in the physical for that to happen. I think that at the end of the day, we need to put those lots up for sale now that we have a better idea, kind of a plan on what we plan on what we're going to do there. And and that kind of money and seeing some development come in, everything would be happening at the same time. I think everybody would get excited about that. But putting a road in there right now, we still have to sell those lots. We still have to get somebody to build something before we can attract people to come to town here. Where are they going to stay? Where are they going to move into? If that stuff is happening, everything just falls into place. I'd rather build it when the development comes and at the same time, and be willing to, and I would borrow. I would be in favor of borrowing for that. That would make it, to me, would be a good investment in that area. But to spend money that we dearly need elsewhere doesn't make sense. Councillor Ventimiglia.
I think what I appreciated the time that we were given over this past week to go away and speak to people and get some feedback, because the feedback that I received, once we flushed through the different options and talked about our vision for Station Street being a catalyst to enhance and revitalize Main Street, and we're not talking about 2 or 3 years, we're talking about a longer term project here, initiative, but this being the catalyst. Overwhelmingly, 100% of the people that I spoke to could see the potential in doing Station Street and thought it was a good idea for us to move forward with. I think if we look at Main Street, I grew up here, most of us grew up here. We have not seen investment there in how many years? Something burns down, it leaves a hole. Torn down, leaves a hole. As Councillor Grace said, obviously what we're doing isn't working. And so it's time for us to try something new, or, if we believe enough in the potential of our community, then it's on us to try something new and to make a bit of a move. Because, I think this will be the third time I've said it, but I think that it really goes back to just believing in the potential of our community. It's well documented, exodus from cities right now, people looking for places to go. And if we can show that we believe in our community, we believe that there's potential here, we're willing to move forward on something, then as was mentioned multiple times with the commercial area, the industrial area, people will, the idea is that the infill starts to happen. There was one more thing I wanted to say. Oh, that's it. I think we're always going to need to, obviously we're always going to need to repair what we have. We're always going to need to work on maintaining and upkeeping and enhancing the roads that we have. But I think if anything, this budget has shown us, or that this iteration of the budget has shown us that we need to build up our capacity. That's number one, what we should be working on in the next couple of years, as soon as that policing money makes the transfer over to policing. That's it for me for now. Thank you.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, hearing everything, and I still feel the same, but one of the first things this council did was take down the for sale signs down on Station Street. Maybe it's time we put those signs back up for another year. Build your hotel here, call the mayor, and we'll put your phone number on there. Build your apartment block here, call the mayor. Several signs along that street to show that it's available, and maybe do some marketing or put some money somewhere, get money somewhere to do a little bit of marketing. Let's see what kind of response we can get in the next year. And then move ahead with this project in another year. Give us a chance to catch up a little bit with our other repairs in the meantime. No one's saying this needs to go away, but I agree with the mayor. And it also, we heard it from our CFO. When those people are coming here, they are the ones that should pay for it in the future. So that would be the time when those people are coming here and say, we want to build an apartment building and bring 150 or 200 or 300 people into Oliver to help out your downtown, and we want to put it down on Station Street. We should borrow the money to build up Station Street in conjunction with the building. And therefore, the people that are moving into the building will be the ones that pay for that long-term financing for the improvement that they're getting the benefit of. So I am with Councillor Grice in that let's put it off a year.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. Just a thought. If I kind of agree with your idea, Mayor Johansson, about borrowing some money for Station Street. I think, as you put it, it's a longer term project, and it's going to be paid for in the longer term. So is there a way to borrow for that in the next 6 months, or say half of it, borrow enough that the gas tax money for $500,000 and change could be used elsewhere, and that we would still be doing a little bit of work on the other priorities, but we'd also have this priority going forward as well. And maybe it couldn't all be completed this year, but I certainly would hope that it would be completed early next year if possible. Thank you.
Is that a question to the CFO? Councillor Schwarzenberger? Comment.
Certainly.
Thank you, the chair. The gas tax money certainly can be reallocated. It's it's made, the criteria upon which that we can utilize it is quite broad. So the money can be shifted to other capital works projects. So I don't foresee that being an issue.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Your Worship. Couple things. One, I just want to make sure that my intentions were clear, that I'm not suggesting that we put the project off until next year. However, if it were voted out of the budget, I would want to ensure that it was brought back for next year. So that was one point. I agree with Councillor Schwarzenberger's remarks about borrowing for the project. I think that takes care of what we were discussing of having the project paid down the road. And also, I would happily see the Vector truck come out of the budget. I think with the discussions last week around maintenance and around labor costs being on top of the cost of purchasing the truck, I don't think it's going to necessarily be financially beneficial for us, and we could continue renting the truck as we had been. Or I think Councillor Michelle said something maybe about purchasing it out of the water budget and renting it, but I don't want to speak for him if he wants to throw that on the table. So those are my remarks. Thank you.
Councillor Mattis?
Question through the CFO. Under the new rules that the government has put in, we are allowed to borrow from ourselves. I don't see any capital works projects related to parks in here. I believe we have close to $1 million in our parks reserve.
Through the chair to Councillor Mattis, we had about $1 million. We've drawn that down for the bridge park, as well as we utilized it in 2020 for the solar pathway, the 2 solar pathway projects, because I was just looking at that today. So I'm estimating right now you're probably left with around $700,000.
Okay, so but we could borrow that from ourselves, and I believe we have some other reserves that we could borrow from, pay ourselves interest rather than paying it to the borrowing from the province and paying them. If we're going to pay interest, we might as well pay it to ourselves. So we do have internal funds that we can borrow to move everything ahead if we chose to. At this point, we don't have to go outside. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah, that's correct. I did want to also just jump in and just want to clarify the comment that was made last week about having to pay up, or we have to hire more people to do to work on the Vector truck. That's not true. The present staff complement we have would be trained, and there'd be no increase in pay. So that the operating costs really are exactly the same as what they are today.
So what you're suggesting is, instead of sending a truck out to supervise the back truck, it would actually be the crew going out and doing the work.
Correct. Actually, there's a lot of efficiencies, and Sean can talk to this. And plus, there's some WorkSafe BC issues that I didn't realize until Darren Bjornson brought it to our attention. But certainly the efficiencies of where, if you have to go out to a job site, you got to get a backhoe, you got to bring a dump truck out, then you got to turn around and whatever other crews you have, versus a back truck does it all.
And if I could add to that, the ongoing maintenance, it's, if anything had to be done in the first year, which is likely not going to happen, that's why we would set a proper charge out rate, and that would be covered under the mobile equipment fund in future years. And we did talk to Darren. Darren gave us some more points. Yeah, safety was one of them. He did think that at year 10, and depending on how many hours we put on the piece of equipment, it should last us 10 years. It could last us more. Our sweeper was supposed to, we were supposed to change that out years ago. We put some money into it and we've prolonged the life out of it. But when it comes to safety, like there's some areas where a Vector truck is needed. And when you purchase a Vector truck, it'll slowly fizzle out the amount of work needed by a backhoe too, because it starts replacing a lot of the work the backhoe does right now. That's all I had to add.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Sean, because there's a $100,000 backhoe in the budget for this year as well. On that note, do you think we need both then?
Yes, the backhoe is, we've been paying for it since day one, since we purchased it. It's all coming out of the mobile equipment fund. We've had some electrical issues. Most of the things have been rectified to a point, but the hours are getting up there. It's the most used piece of equipment that we have. So we definitely need the backhoe. There's still always uses for backhoe. Vector trucks, it's going to take us a year to get people trained and to utilize it properly. And by year 2 and 3, you're using it a lot more. Right now, there are things that we're doing with the backhoe that could be done with a Vector truck easier. So there's something to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I mean, I could buy into the idea of borrowing a portion of the Station Street project for the reasons mentioned, to save a bit for future year's budget. But this idea of borrowing from yourself, I am not familiar with it. And so I'm hoping that the CFO can kind of explain why you do one over the other. What are the risks? Could we even go out and borrow conventionally right now on short notice for a project such as this, et cetera, et cetera?
Through the chair, the borrowing upon itself has always been in many municipalities will do internal borrowing from reserves. What the province did with COVID is they actually brought that out a little bit easier for municipalities to do it. And what that really means is the reserves that we have that are statutory in nature, they can only be utilized for specific purposes. And so what the provinces came forward with specific legislation said, subject to that legislation, we will allow municipalities to borrow upon, let's say, an equipment replacement reserve, if we had sufficient funds in that reserve, and where we had another project that was a sewer project that we could utilize the equipment replacement reserve, borrow from it, pay it back, its principal and its interest at market rates, instead of what Councillor Mattis is suggesting, instead of utilizing a paid to somebody else, let's say a bank or financial institution. Usually we would always short-term borrow from the Municipal Finance Authority, because the Municipal Finance Authority is basically a non-profit arm of municipal governments in British Columbia, and you can't get cheaper financing anywhere than you can from them. And you can borrow up to 5 years on a short-term capital basis without going to assent. As soon as you go past 5 years, then you have to go to assent. But that's primarily what the province did with allowing municipalities to borrow from their statutory reserves. You always have the flexibility of the non-statutory reserves, which are really truly appropriated surplus, of utilizing that surplus in different means. So for example, we do have many reserves that are appropriated surplus where we just take money and put that we've saved over the years and put it off into a reserve. that money can always be utilized for a different purpose. And that was when I brought forward that surplus and reserves policy last year. That was one of the first attempts, is to try to consolidate some of those reserves into kind of like what the recreation people have over at the Parks and Rec, this super reserve, where you can have this 1 or 2 or 3 reserves where you can utilize it instead of having 20 reserves. So I don't know if I've muddied the waters or answered the question. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you very much.
Councillor Michelle?
Interesting that I'm glad that our CFO answered that, actually, because I was kind of in favor of borrowing for a Vector truck, and I was, well, we might have to go to a cent, but he just said we can borrow up to 5 years without going to a cent. I think if we're going to buy a Vector truck, that would make more sense to me because of the charge out that I was worried about, and we'd get more accurate reflection of the charge out, because after 5, we could amortize over 5 years. In other words, the charge out fee would be reflective to have it paid in 5 years, and you won't have to go to a cent. I think that would make a lot more sense. Then we'd know which different accounts would pay for it. In essence, I mean, water might be more than 100 and whatever we're looking at right now. Might be less. Sewer might be more, might be less. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then we don't have to, like I was making the point earlier that we have already passed the water budget. Now there's another $100,000 that really wasn't budgeted for. If we borrow over 5 years and have that amortization built into the charge out, it's paid off in 5 years, and we don't have to come up with that money up front. I think that makes a lot of sense. One other point I wanted to ask about too, and my questions always kind of revolve around water because I can't really discuss other stuff, but Station Street, if council develops it, would you have then a latecomer agreement, or how would you, because I know the motel that's down there now, and typically, anything that's done is paid for by the developer as well, or a portion of it. How would that work on Station Street? Because there's $200,000 worth of water there, that if somebody developed that, then they would pay a good chunk of that on their own. But if we develop it, is there some kind of a latecomer agreement where they pay for that later, and how long does that last?
Latecomers are usually good for 10 years.
But is that how we would look to do that?
Hasn't even been discussed.
Because I mean, the motel that's there now, they have to pay their fair share, and other developers have to pay a fair share when streets and water and sewer are upgraded. If we put it in, then it's not really a fair playing field anymore. I don't see it as a fair playing field unless you have a latecomers. And what if you don't develop within 10 years? Well, you've just thrown a bunch of money that the developer should have actually paid for, whoever puts that whatever project goes in there.
It would almost fall into the category of helping developers.
Anyway, through to the CFO, was that the plan, to have some kind of a latecomer? I mean, I think that's a valid point. I mean, developers have always, in Oliver, have always helped to contribute. If you've had to extend the water or sewer or roads, they've paid for half of it, I think, usually, and makes sense. But I don't know if it was a latecomers or if you just say, well, it's going to be a gift to whoever decides to build down there. And that's not fair to the other developers that have paid money up front. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle. Councillor Mattis?
Just to go back to the borrowing from other reserves, we talked about the solid waste reserve, and if we turn that into a utility, then it would be a break even, and we'd have to figure out what to do with that reserve. So I know our CFO doesn't think that we should borrow from ourselves. He prefers to borrow from outside sources, but if it was your house and you had money in the bank, why would you go outside to borrow the money when you can borrow it from yourself and pay yourself interest? And I'll leave it at that.
CFO, just a question on borrowing. Where would the payback come from? Would it affect the capital program? Just wondering, is it something that we would have to raise taxation to make those payments? I mean, it's going to come from the same source regardless almost where you borrow it from, but just wondering on that, if you can answer that for me.
If the actual, through the chair, the actual, like a debt servicing is what Councillor Mattis is referring to, it's whether we borrow external or internal. And just for the record, I'm not opposed to internal. It's just, it's not done frequently, but it can certainly be done. But what would happen is the debt servicing would be formed part of the operating budget. No different than any other debt servicing where we take out a loan, the principal and interest, we would just become a line item in our operating budget. And it would just be over however we would structure an amortization table. So if it would be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever that would be, and we'd ensure that those monies would be expended in the various operating budgets.
Thank you. Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. Through to the CFO. I'm sorry if you answered this last week. I can't remember. Do you know what's in that solid waste reserve?
It was approximately $300,000.
Thank you.
Councillor Schwarzenberger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to the CFO. Now I lost my train. No, I recall now. The last conversation by Councillor Mattis about latecomer agreements, is that doable on Station Street? And my other question would be regarding Packing House Lane. Probably not, because it's affordable housing, but are they paying for part of the rehabilitation of Packing House Lane? Thank you.
I'll answer the last one first. The developer has contributed $300,000 to Packing House Lane for specifically improvements for Packing House Lane, over and above, as Councillor Mattis indicated, various DCCs and permitting charges, etc. The first one on the latecomers, I'm not really familiar with it's not in my bailiwick of expertise. I see if the CAO would know a little bit more about them, but certainly if there is development that will benefit from the various infrastructure that's going in there, there certainly is the ability within the community charter and the Local Government Act to develop a latecomers agreement. I do believe that Councillor Mattis is quite correct that it is in 10 years.
Thank you.
I guess I'll add just a couple more thoughts on that, because one thing we haven't really talked about is the Station Street Plaza. I really do think, again, I'm repeating myself, that we should hold off on Station Street. I do like the idea of being able to borrow for it. I think I could be persuaded to consider Station Street, but I'd sure like to know that the Plaza got funded and visit it at that time again, noting that if we do get the $1 million in funding for the Plaza, then we would move forward, because it wouldn't make sense to build the Plaza without doing Station Street. And that would be a good time to consider whether we borrow not consider, but at that time we borrow for it, because we got the $1 million, and at least there's some infrastructure going in that looks like there's something else going on there. I also think we need to get those properties up for sale, I think, as soon as possible. I don't believe as the town here that we're ever going to develop anything on those properties ourselves. So getting them up for sale sooner than later, if we can get them sold this year. There was one person that was interested when we pulled the pin on the sale a couple of years ago. So I think there may be some interest there, especially with what is planned for Station Street as far as the roads go. The Plaza would be a bonus there. I just really think we're a little early in the game here, and the conversations around latecomer agreements just shows us that we're just kind of pushing the envelope of rushing this to get it in, when a year isn't going to kill us. I do think it's a great project. I think we need to really have a look at the timing. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to kind of dovetail onto that, because you said some of the things I was going to say, and I'm asking the rest of council for their view on leaving this in the budget, and if there's a way that we can leave it in the budget this year with instruction that it's not to proceed until we determine A, if the Plaza is moving ahead, and B, where the funding will come from, and which could be another council discussion if and when the Plaza occurs, that we would have that discussion around those items. And I'm not sure how you would word that or how you give staff direction that, yes, you leave it in the budget, but no, don't do it until we hear back on the plaza. Wondering what council thinks.
Council, excuse me, Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to say on the point of latecomer agreements, that was something that we discussed at one of our multiple sessions, I believe, over the summer. It was something that we all agreed was an item that we would absolutely like to see as a part of this project. We didn't have the details, the fine details, but it was definitely something that we all agreed on, because absolutely developers coming to develop the land down there should pay their fair share. They're just getting a boost by having the infrastructure put in ahead of time.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think obviously going down the road, we're going to have to start borrowing some money for some of our infrastructure, especially when our policing costs kick in. So I'm willing to leave Station Street on the books, and hopefully we can borrow for it when the time comes. I think really the catalyst, as the mayor said, would be when the plaza's ready. If we don't get the money for the plaza, then I think we need to rethink the whole project a little bit. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but the urgency goes away. So I'd be willing to leave it on the books, but waiting in lieu of the funding for the plaza. And then at that time, if we need to go forward and we need to borrow some money, I'd be in favor of that as well. Thank you.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This talk about waiting until we find out whether or not we receive funding for the plaza, when actually are we meant to find out whether we receive funding or not? That might not even be a feasible option.
CAO.
Through the chair, we are expecting to hear within the next couple of weeks whether or not we've received funding for that project.
Thank you. So if I may follow up on that, and when does our budget need to be approved by?
Our budget can actually be approved by, it has to be adopted before the tax rates bylaw, so, which is April, but we'd really like to have our capital budget and operating budget adopted, obviously, before that time frame.
Okay, thank you. So then my final comment on that would be, I don't necessarily agree that one depends on the other. I think that we could move ahead with Station Street with or without the plaza. Obviously, we would continue to apply for funding for the plaza, and maybe have a conversation about whether we add it to our list of allowable uses in our DCC. So I don't think that you need one, one doesn't happen without the other, but I also, well, to me, it just seems kind of silly to put this large project in the budget, and we may or may not do it, and we'll pass the budget, and then in 3 or 4 weeks we'll find out that we didn't get funding for the plaza, and now what do we do with this money that we've just had this big long conversation about and made a decision in favor of moving forward with the Station Street, for example. So I think if the decision of council is that one doesn't happen without the other, it makes more sense to wait and see what happens with the funding around the plaza. But again, personally, I don't see the need for the plaza to be done in tandem with Station Street. It would be nice, but once Station Street's built, we can continue to go for funding or find other funding sources for the plaza.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. just to follow up on Councillor Ventimiglia there, I think we could do exactly that. If it's only 3 or 4 weeks away, we can leave it in the budget. It allows us again to revisit this in 3 or 4 weeks, depending on when the answer comes for the Plaza, and gives us 3 or 4 more weeks to talk to our more constituents, think about it more. And then in 3 or 4 weeks, if we get the answer, then we can also sit down as a council and determine where we're going to get the money. But it doesn't mean we can't move ahead with the budget as it sits today.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to just suggest, since, it seems like, we're sitting on Station Street going back and forth. But there's kind of an appetite, or it seems to be an appetite, to borrow some money to do it when we decide to do it, that we might go ahead with Okanagan Street and School Avenue, and then with the idea that when Station Street comes to the fore again in a month's time or whatever, and we have that discussion, if we decide to go forward, we're deciding to borrow the money to do it. Thank you.
I don't think we can do both streets, Okanagan and School. I think it's one or the other, and wipe out the deficit that we have currently at the same time. Because we're still $400,000 short.
Right.
And just to jump in quickly, we also need to think ahead to 2022, where we don't have enough money to fund Packing House Lane, which is, we are committed to doing that. We're a couple $100,000, 168,000 short currently. Councillor Ventimiglia. Whoops, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Oh, thank you. I think I just had my hand up to make sure that everybody saw the Director of Development Services message saying that latecomer agreements are good for 15 years.
Thank you. I did not see that. Councillor Michelle.
Through to the CFO, how does, if we decided to, which I would be in favor of on the vac truck, to borrow that money over 5 years from the municipal, how does that affect your shortfall? So in other words, you don't have to come up with all that money in one shot. You do it divided by 5, and then so how does that affect your number?
Makes it vanish.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, that's my point.
Through the chair, I just want to get some clarification from Sean, actually, because the one project we haven't talked about that I thought was tied kind of in with Station Street isn't the storm pipe upgrade.
That's correct. It is, and we discussed that. I discussed that at the last meeting, and should have brought it up again. But it's a storm pipe upgrade at Fairview. So if we are doing Station Street, there's a few $100,000 tied to that. That the storm needs to be upgraded. It's just not sufficient to add more onto it. The system.
I think we'd already agreed with that. We're moving ahead with that simply because of the catch basin that storm drain serves. The whole downtown flows through there. It isn't just Station Street.
Yeah, part of Main Street. Yeah.
That's why it wasn't up for discussion.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Sorry, not quick enough to put my hand down. That's exactly what I was going to say. As I understood it, when we discussed last time, there were 2 separate projects. And so whether or not we do Station Street, we'd be doing the storm drains.
So if we borrow money for the vac truck and we borrow money for the Station Street, we're basically talking $1.5 million, if I understand correctly. I'm jumping in here. I know I didn't have my hand up, but that's $1.5 million, and we're $400,000 short approximately, or so that would leave us 1.1 million that we could spend if we borrow for those other two items. And 1.1 million would be very close to doing Okanagan and school.
You lost me. The vac truck itself was coming out of the way it was presented to council tonight was coming at about $260,000 out of taxation. The other project off of Station Street out of taxation was only coming at what would I say here? Was it $50,000? The rest of the funding was either coming from reserves, gas tax monies, or water and sewer fund.
I'm just looking at it, Doug, in gross numbers. Where it comes from doesn't matter. The vac truck is 517,000 or 527,000 that we would not be taking from those sources, which means that we have 527,000 sitting on the table.
But you would have to pay that out of your tax revenue somewhere.
I understand.
For that vac truck.
Yeah, so that means that that $87,000 that we pulled out of operating to put into capital would be lower. That's all. But anyway, so we have 527 that sitting on the table from the vac truck. We're short 411. So the difference to me is $116,000. And then when you borrow the other $1 million for Station Street, now you're looking at 1.116, $1,116,000 that you could spend on other projects. I haven't, because I'm doing this all off the top of my head. I haven't, I don't know what the total budget for the Okanagan Street. It looks like the total budget for Okanagan and school is about $1,080,000. So there's actually money there to do both and eliminate our deficit and move ahead with Station Street and move ahead with a vac truck if we're prepared to borrow money for the vac truck and prepared to borrow money for Station Street. Regardless of where we borrow it from, we can do all of those projects this year. Does that clarify, make it a little easier for the rest of council? We have the money to do it all. We can determine where we're going to borrow the funds from for Station Street down the road, like in 3 or 4 weeks when we get the answer on the other thing. And where we borrow the money for the vac truck, I'm not exactly certain at this point, but it can be done.
So just a question to the CFO quickly. If we did borrow $1 million, we'd have to pay back a couple $100,000 a year because we have to pay it back in 5 years.
We're borrowing $1 million for what?
Well, say you borrowed for the Vector truck and then you borrowed for Station Street. $1 million from your reserves.
Well, it would probably be about 220,000 a year or something like that. Before we start to do things like that, I would really highly recommend that, you know, you provide me with specific direction, what you want me to look at, that I can come back to council. I want to make sure that the legislative authority and all the various things are in place that we can do what we think we can do.
Oh, I agreed, CFO. I was just trying to determine what the payback would be because that is quite significant compared to the 80 that we saved. CAO, you have a comment?
I was just going to put a question through to the CFO through the chair. What would happen if we do all of this and we do all these projects? How do we deal with, in 2022, how do we deal with the packing house lane?
Well, that good question, because you still have the packing house lane that has to be dealt with in one way, shape, or form. Like meaning that we'd be utilizing some gas tax money, DCC money, as well as the developer contribution money is still there. So is the DCC money. The gas tax money will still be there. It's just that shortfall of approximately $350,000 or $360,000 that we have to come up with. Now, keep in mind in 2022, over and above our policing deal that we're going to have, we're going to be prepared to raise taxes 16%. Over and above a capital shortfall. Just so everyone's aware of that. That was always in the projection. Soon as we forgave 9% in 2020, that's what was going to be triggered in 2022.
Thank you, CFO. Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. My understanding of borrowing from ourselves internally, the repayment schedule can be whatever length we determine, as long as we do not leave that particular reserve short of funding for projects that it may have upcoming. So you're not obligated to pay it back in 5 years. You could do it on a 20-year amortization if you chose, as long as that particular reserve does not run short of funds.
And also, you would never go beyond the life of the asset.
There you go.
Okay, thank you for that,
In case of
Councillor
a road
Mattis.
that's 100 years.
Yeah. Councillor Schwarzenberger?
Thank you, Your Worship. If we borrowed for Station Street, that would relieve $560 some worth of gas tax that is allocated for Station Street. Would that be able to be put towards Packing House Lane?
Yes.
So there you go.
Councillor
But it also means you wouldn't be able to put it towards Okanagan or school if you put it towards Packing House.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we've put a lot of hypotheticals on the table here now, and it would probably behoove all of council to give direction to the CFO now to bring us an adjusted budget, because it's a lot of numbers have moved around here, which I think is great. I think it seems like we've strategically found a way to get everything done here, but we need to see this in writing now to make sure that we can move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. I agree as well. So we would like feedback on borrowing for the Vector truck. 527, is that what we're going to borrow the whole amount? 527,000?
Yeah, I would believe so, yes.
From what reserve and what repayment? I think we were told that from Sean that the service life on that truck is 8 to 10 years. Director Goodsell, is that correct?
That's correct. We think we can get 10 years.
Okay. And we would borrow for Station Street the equivalent of the gas tax, 534. Again, from what reserve and what period would the amortization be over? There was some discussion about Station Street Plaza. We wanted to get some feedback on that before we made a final decision on Station Street. I remember that being part of the discussion.
That was to see if the grant is approved or not.
Right. The money would go to School Avenue and Okanagan Street. So we would be looking to fund those two projects in 2021 as well. Was that correct? Am I remembering?
Yep. No, let's look at the options.
Okay. And as far as rehab Packing House Lane, that would still stay in 2022, and we would be looking to, well, we'll address that at that time. It's a have to do, but we're going to have some discussion in 2022 because we've got a fair amount of taxation there. Some of it will be removed with Okanagan Street and School Avenue, but there's still quite a bit there and not much in the way of funding. Did I capture everything?
Yeah, maybe we need to tie in some view of what our reserves are and the ones we could borrow from.
Okay. Councillor Grice?
Thank you. I think the last little bit was just that in borrowing for Station Street, it was going to free up gas tax, which could then potentially be used for Packing House Lane next year. I think that was what was going to cover that gap, if I'm not mistaken.
Councillor Michelle?
Thank you, Worship. I think if we're going to look into borrowing, comment that the CFO made that we can do up to 5-year borrowing through the Municipal Finance Authority. For the vac truck, I think we should pursue that because it's very favorable, and that would also free up more room if you guys are going to borrow internally for some of these other projects.
Let's take a look at what we can borrow internally. Maybe we can borrow it all internally. You charge the same rate as MFA anyways, internally or externally. So it's the same dollars. Doesn't matter how favorable it is, it's favorable from ourselves.
That's fine, but I'd still like the answer to the question next time we meet. As far as, you know, if we can borrow from municipal finance, so we should get that answer anyway.
Don't say it, Doug.
No. I said hopefully we'll get our 5 million soon.
Is there an assent process to borrow for the Vector truck? Is that where the 5 years comes from?
I believe so, but I got to do some research on that legislation.
Okay.
But and Councillor Mattis is right. I think the flexibility of borrowing from ourselves would probably be the better option currently.
Just while I'm still unmuted, I've said many times in the past that we should borrow from ourselves because there's always a spread. We don't get as much on our reserves and the interest, although interest rates now are so low, so it's almost insignificant. But you should always, if you've got the money in business, that's how you do it. That's how you run business. Because why would you throw it, even if it's a small amount? Why would you throw that away? Anyway, just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Can everybody see the motion that's up there? Do we need a dollar value for Station Street Phase 2, the funding amount for that?
No.
Okay.
I'm not sure that we're directing staff to proceed with Okanagan and school at this point until we get the results of this report back. Like that's all part of this report. We may only be able to afford one of those if a portion of the money needs to go next year into Packing House Lane.
Councillor Bryce?
Maybe it doesn't make sense to spend every penny if we're going to need more pennies next year.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think the pending the outcome of the Station Street grant needs to be in this motion at this point. We're just looking for financial information from the CFO, so that's not going to determine whether or not we go ahead. I don't know if I articulated that correctly or not, but I would want to see that piece come out.
You don't need that information, Doug, for direction?
No, I think I get the gist of what council's after.
Okay.
Can we put something in there regarding a net staff determine options regarding Okanagan Street and School Avenue funding in relation to Packing House Lane?
Could you repeat that again, Councillor Mattis? Sorry.
In relation to, you're doing good, in relation to school, in relation to funding, Packing House Lane,
Okay.
in 2022, if you want to put that in. I know there's a whole bunch of stuff swirling around out there, so it'd be nice to kind of put it all in perspective.
Diane, can you put Avenue after school?
Yes. Thank you.
Direct staff. So we have a motion that council directs staff to determine the processes to potentially proceed with the Vector truck purchase of 527K through borrowing. That council directs staff to determine the process to potentially proceed with Station Street Phase 2 project through borrowing and to determine the amortization schedules. And the staff determine options for funding at Okanagan Avenue and School Avenue in relation to funding Packing House Lane in 2022.
I'll move that motion.
Moved by Councillor Grice,
I'll second.
second Councillor Mattis. Any further comments on that or discussion? I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. So I suppose our next steps would be when this information is available, we'll have to reconvene. Would it be a separate budget meeting? We'll just do the same thing that we did and reconvene, or will we adjourn this meeting and talk about this at a regular council meeting, CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do believe that you will probably want to postpone the continuation of this meeting to allow the CFO the opportunity to do the research, etc., because we will be having a meeting of regular council on Monday, and I don't know if he will be able to have that information entirely available for you by that time.
Okay.
I'll try. If there's a way, I'll put a staff report together for that meeting, and then I guess we could talk about it at that night as well. It's a week tonight, so hopefully, if I can get the information I think I need, then I won't know exactly my reserve balances, but I will have a pretty good estimate. So, as of the end of 2020, I'm referring to.
So what you're saying is that we should just adjourn this meeting and you'll do it in the regular meeting on Monday?
If I can. If I can't, then I guess we'll have to delay it for another meeting, but yes.
Adjourn this meeting. Okay.
Well, can we just postpone this until that meeting?
No, because it'd be a different meeting.
Okay.
I think personally, I'd rather just whatever we do with this go in recess and we get that information from the CFO, but we also wanted to know about whether we were, and it sounds like within a couple of weeks, we will know about the Plaza, and there was some discussion that was information that we would like to have before we conclude capital budget discussions. But is that too long to wait? We could be waiting a while for that.
Through the chair,
Yes.
It's getting tight because they are working on year end as well, so they're trying to.
Yeah, the one thing that does help actually extending that timeline, that does give me more clarity in terms of my reserve balances, because I'll have them definitely balanced, certainly probably by about the middle of February. So towards, if we don't get together again towards the end, until the end of February, even the first when's our first meeting in March? March 1? 8th. We could have a special meeting. You know, I would probably the 8th is a little tight for me, certainly, 2 weeks later, which obviously ties in with your grant. I don't know when you're going to hear anything back from the provinces. We haven't heard anything back in terms of $5 million. So.
Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just echo what you said. I think that we want to have that. It'd be great to have that grant information if we can. But also, I'd rather have a special meeting for this, I think, just because it's been such an in-depth discussion, and I would hate to sort of jam it into a regular council meeting and feel like we're rushing through the process. I think it would be better left for a special meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Ventimiglia.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I'd prefer to personally leave the budget meetings as budget meetings because they do tend to get a bit in depth, and I would hate, for the clock to be running out and the next meeting to be ready to start and us to be rushing through at the end. I personally prefer to have the time that we need.
So should we could plan for a meeting on the 15th? That's regular council day? No.
No, it's,
Oh, that's family day.
yeah.
We could
Be
plan
the Tuesday.
on the 16th.
Shrove Tuesday?
Would you like to go for the 23rd, perhaps, the day after our next, the end of the month, and that gives Doug the ability to provide reserve information?
Yeah, there's no urgency on my side. The 23rd would be fine as well.
Okay. So do we recess till the 23rd then?
We can set a new meeting if you like.
So we can adjourn this meeting.
We can go later after in the week following our council meeting as well, depending on what Doug can do.
Okay.
Once Doug says he's ready, then we could schedule a meeting doodle or whatever at that point. Do the 48 hours notice and go away.
Okay. Then we will, there's no public in attendance at this point, so there's no public question period. And we'll just look for a motion to adjourn, thinking the 23rd will probably be when we will meet again, but it could be moved around. There's some options there, but we won't put that in the motion. We'll just look for a motion to adjourn today.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Moved. Second, thank you. Call a question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you, Council.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And everybody.
Good night.
Good night.